Good morning, professor and students. We are Team 6 and we are going to present about ethical leadership and decision making in accounting. This is our table of contents. Our table of contents include case 8.3 and case 8.5. In case 8.3, we are going to introduce the primary case, and in 8.5, we are going to introduce Krispy Kreme bonus case. Now I'm going to present the case of permanent, which is called Elon of the Europe. Elon's case is one of representative of the fraud case, and the case of Elon is famous because of the company's size. Elon was the top 7 company in the America, but they bankrupt due to frauds they made. They manipulated the balance sheet and they made paper companies to pretend themselves as the healthy company to the investor. The permanent that I'm going to introduce is the Dairy and Food Corporation, which is a subsidiary of French multinational company Lactalis. They became the leading global company in the production of long-life milk using ultra-high temperature processing. Their representative products are milk products like cheese and fruit juices. The Parmalat was a small family-owned pasteurization plant in Parma, which is established by Callisto Tangi in 1961. However, with the milk dairy, beverage, bakery, and other various product lines, Parmalat became multinational corporation in 1980 that became listed in the Milan Stock Exchange in 1990s, and in 2002, Palmer's share price had reached a record, and the company was valued at 3.7 billion euro, employing over 30,000 people in 30 countries. At that time, the symbol of the financial ability was own football club in Italy, like any other European countries did, and Parma also owned successful football club called Parma AC, which won UEFA Cup and Coppa Italia, which is the big competition in football. However, Parma's golden days did not stay long. Parma have collapsed by on with the fraud that they have made with the unethical leadership of Tanji, the CEO of Parmalat and his family in 2003, with the report of Bank of America. In 2003, the Bank of America stated the Parmalat financial situation that Parmalat is having announced accounting fraud of fake balance sheets in current assets and fake accounts. The Fausto Tona was the CFO of the Parmalat announced that they are having bond issue of 300 euros, and it was quite shocking news to the both primary CEO and the market because they were leading company in the market. The CEO Tanji, however, he replaced the CFO to the Alberto Ferraris and fired Tona, who announced the bond issue that Parmalat is having. Luca Salla, the former head of the Italian corporate financial division, then denied his wrongdoing and maintained that he did not aid Parmalat executives in sustaining the price of Parmalat securities despite knowing the state of its finance. But prosecutors believed that the executives of Parmalat used paper company and forged documents to conceal losses and divert cash, and Salah was linked to a $500 million permanent bond issued by Bank of America and other banks. In February, for the first time, Bank of America along with Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, Deutsche Bank, UBS AG, and several Italian banks become a formal target of the Italian investigation surrounding the permanent bankruptcy, and the Lucasalla admit his improprieties but still claim that the banks were unaware of his improprieties. An Italian judge is asked by prosecutors to order 29 executives and 3 companies to stand trial on 4 separate charges, and the 3 executives from Bank of America and Lucasalla were involved. Creditors filed a $10 billion of class action lawsuit against former auditors and banks of Parmalat, including fraudulent activity and giving misleading information. In same year, October, Parmalat sued Bank of America, Citigroup, Deloitte Touch, and Grant Thornton for $10 billion in damages, but Bank of America denied any wrongdoing in the matter and was considered filing its own countersuit against Parmalat. And in 2005, the $8 billion of class action lawsuit was dismissed, and Bank of America were judged that they did not know that Parmalat was in financial trouble and thus could not profit off the company's downturn. However, the judge did not dismiss claims included in the suit against Citigroup and other banks. This kind of long legal battle ends at 2009. The bank was involved in the Parmalat's bankruptcy, and Parmalat itself made fraud accounts and paper company to raise the sales like what Elon did. And also the auditor have failed to find the Parmalat's financial situation before the Bank of America announced that they are having problem. The most serious problem and the source of the scandal was unethical leadership of Penji. He was sentenced in 4 related but different frauds, which are Parmalat fraud, Parmalat bankruptcy, Parmator bankruptcy, and Parma AC bankruptcy.
Let me discuss about the overall ethical leadership theory and analysis. The first thing I will discuss about is authentic leadership. It is a word that is always mentioned when identifying an ethical leader. Authentic leadership is as follows. Authentic leadership is a style of leadership that focuses on transparent and ethical behavior and encourages open sharing of information needed to make decisions. In addition, leaders with authentic leadership concentrate on building long-term shareholder value, not short-term. From this point of view, let's investigate the case of Parmalat. Can we say that the top management of Parmalat are transparent? And can we also say that they led the company from a long-term perspective? Absolutely not. Because of their immediate profits, they created a virtual company that exists only in documents, and they manipulated financial statements and deceived auditors and investors. Moving on, authentic leadership holds that leaders have to acknowledge the ethical responsibility of their roles and recognize ethical issues. Finally, they can take more actions that are thoroughly grounded in their beliefs and values. In fact, the top management failed in more behavior based on their own beliefs and values. They were only silent about this phenomenon because of pressure from the Tanj family. Lastly, the leader who has the authentic leadership are concerned about achieving a common good for a group or organization and produce positive effects in followers that significantly influence the creation of ethical environment in which members of the organization make decisions based on value and ethical choice without a leader. This explanation is very related to the social learning theory we will discuss later. In general, ethical behavior performed by leaders is contagious within the organization. In conclusion, they failed to create an ethical environment because they did not do the right thing as ethical leaders. Let's identify at this part later. So we will specifically learn about authentic leadership. There are four components: self-awareness, balanced processing, relational transparency, and international moral perspective. Among them, what we need to pay attention to is relational transparency and international moral perspective. Top management of Parmalat were not honest with the stakeholders around them, and they put their own interest above the success of the organization. Therefore, we can judge that they have failed in authentic leadership because they lack these two factors. The next thing to find out is the aforementioned social learning theory, which holds that individuals in the organization look models and imitate their behavior. It means that employees learn what to do and what not to do in the workplace by observing their leaders' behavior and its consequences. Simply, leaders influence their followers and followers follow leaders' actions. Therefore, if there is a leader in an organization who conducts ethical behavior based on value, the members of the organization also follow the leader's behavior, result in an ethical environment within the organization. However, if there is a leader who acts unethically within the organization, the opposite situation occurs. In the case of Parmalat, it belongs to the latter. Tanji family, top management, and CFO Tuna continue to engage in unethical behavior, which was not a secret in Parmalat. There's an interesting situation. An external auditor, Grant Thornton, conducted a general unacceptable audit. In this process, the verification process was used by the internal mail system in Parmalat, and this is delivered to Parmalat staff. What will happen? The employee delivered an email to Tona, the CFO, and the audit ended without anything happening. We can judge that it happened because a proper social learning was not achieved in Parmalat. Moral intensity is the degree of feeling that a person has about the consequences of a moral choice. It can influence the decision maker's moral judgment and moral intent, as well as subsequent moral action. In general, the higher the moral intensity, the stronger the tendency of people to engage in ethical behavior. There are 6 factors of moral intensity, which are magnitude of consequences, social consensus, probability of effect, temporal immediacy, proximity, and concentration of effect. In general, the greater the outcome of an action, whether negative or positive, the moral intensity is stronger. Of course, the stronger the likelihood of happening of what people are concerned, and if it will be happened in near the future, moral intensity is stronger. In addition, if social consensus stipulates that an action is bad, moral intensity have a high tendency to become stronger. Finally, if the result of the action affects someone close to them, and if a number of people who are affected by the moral action are numerous, the moral intensity becomes stronger. Considering these 6 factors, Parmalat, Director of Birth, must feel a very high moral intensity because their behavior can have a tremendous impact. Then why didn't whistleblowers occur? In general, it is said that high moral intensity is more likely to lead to whistleblowers. This may be related to the GVV in the next stage. Last is GVV, giving the voice to value, which is approach to decision making based on value and usually essential if there are differences between organization and individual values. It also helps people learn how to effectively act on values. Whistleblowers is based on this theory. Why didn't GVV work properly in the permanent? And why didn't whistleblowers occur in permanent? The biggest problem is that an ethical organizational environment has not been created. It is very difficult to act based on one's own values in an unethical environment. And the fundamental cause of all this is the lack of ethical leadership of top management in the permanent. They failed to be the ethical role model because they were not authentic leadership. As a result, correct social learning has not been proceeded within the organization.
The primary case is the case that shows how ethical leadership is important in running business. After the management of Palmer changed from Tenzi, they won the lawsuit against banks in America and succeeded to rebuild the company with the compensation that are from the banks. Fausto Tona actually reported the financial situation in 2003, but the CEO Tanji fired him to make him quiet. If Farmarat gave Fausto Tona voice value to inform the situation to the public, the disaster could decrease. Also, there were lack of moral intensity in the Farmarat that although the financial situation was bad in the Farmarat, there were no whistleblower in the Farmarat. Thus, moral intensity and giving voice to values were not worked properly in the Palmer and lead them to bankruptcy. And our recommendation is that the Palmer should have more intensity among the executives and CEO himself and should have gave voice to value to the employees to inform the situation freely.
This is Hayoung Lee. Now I will talk about Krispy Kreme Donuts case. Let me introduce this company briefly. Krispy Kreme Company is a donut company in the US and coffee house chain founded in 1937 by Bernard and Rudolph. The number of locations is 1,400 shops. Also, Krispy Kreme Donuts Company inflated and misrepresented its earnings in 2003 and 2004. Before I proceed with Krispy Kreme fraud, let me talk about the major concepts regarding this case. First, ethical leadership. Ethical leadership is one of the essential elements for the company. It refers to positive relationships built on respect, openness, and trust are critical to creating an ethical organizational environment. Also, the fraud triangle is a model commonly used in auditing that aims to explain why an employee decides to commit fraud in the workplace. So this is the fraud triangle and especially applied to the Krispy Kreme company case. First, Krispy Kreme gave the opportunity to commit fraudulent accounting. In addition, there were motives and pressure that increased it, and it is said that the stage of rationalizing all of them was then taken. This is the timeline that briefly represents the Krispy Kreme Donut Company case. The primary transactions described in this case were round-trip transactions. There were 3 round-trip transactions cited in the SEC consent agreement. First, in 2003 June, the first transaction occurred. Second, in 2003 October, the second transaction occurred. And the third transaction occurred in January 2004. And 1 year later, in 2005 January, they restated its financial statements for 2003 and 2004. Also, in August 2005, SEC, which is the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, reported their fraud. In March 2009, SEC and chef of Krispy Kreme, including CEO, CFO, and COO, reached an agreement. There is the first reacquisition of a franchise in Texas. It occurred in June 2003, which was during the second quarter of fiscal year 2004. In connection with the reacquisition of a franchise in Texas, Krispy Kreme increased the price that is paid for the franchise by $800,000. On the day of the closing, Krispy Kreme debited the franchise's bank account for $744,000. The additional revenue boosted Krispy Kreme's quarterly net income by approximately $365,000 after taxes. The second transaction occurred at the end of October 2003, 4 days from the closing of Krispy Kreme's third quarter of fiscal year 2004. And it was in connection with the reacquisition of a franchise in Michigan, and Krispy Kreme agreed to increase the price by $535,463. This overstated Krispy Kreme's net income in the third quarter by approximately $310,000 after taxes. The third transaction occurred in January 2004, in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2004. It involved the reacquisition of the remaining interests in a franchise in California. It demanded payment of a management fee in consideration of Krispy Kreme's handling of the management duties since October 2003. Also, there is no adjustment of the purchasing price. As a result, they made a distribution to the former franchise manager by $597,415. Additionally, Krispy Kreme net income in the fourth quarter was approximately $361,000. And PwC is also important in this case. PwC is PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the firm also provides significant consulting, tax, and due diligence services. PwC provided independent audit services and rendered the audit opinions on Krispy Kreme fiscal year 2003 and fiscal year 2004 financial statements. In summary, the results are that they made wrong reports regarding the exposure of assets and transactions, and they did not maintain the internal accounting management system properly to achieve profits that meet EPS guidelines. So, on 2009 March 4, Livengood, who is the CEO of Krispy Kreme, paid about $542,000 due to violation of fraud reporting provisions and false certification regulations. Tate, who is COO, paid $136,549 due to violation of fraud reporting provisions and record keeping and internal control rules. Cass Stevens, who is CFO, paid $93,964 due to violation of fraud reporting provisions and record keeping, internal controls, and false certification rules also.
This is Seung-Jeon, and now I will continue the presentation from conclusion and recommendation. In conclusion, Krispy Kreme failed to obtain relevant adventure methods, such as financial statements, and it was unable to act on violations of GAAP rules, such as accounting for franchise rights and the relationship with the franchise of the company. Lastly, it ignored numerous red flags. One of the red flags is rapid growth compared to other companies. If the company grows too fast compared to other competitors, you need to suspect the fraud. Second, aggressive financial goals and expectations by management. Management is controlled by a small group. Even if there are these kinds of red flags, executives of Krispy Kreme ignored them. So, we can distinguish the factors that why fraud occurred. First, individually, there was selfishness and a lack of sense of community of executives, and they had a lack of moral behaviors. Secondly, in organizational factors, there is a lack of clarity and lack of positive role models, and there is no accountability. Also, importantly, we could organize the fraud triangle in Krispy Kreme. The opportunities are weak internal control and audit, and lack of independence of PwC is also one of the opportunities. Motive and pressure are incorrect financial statements, and it regards 3 round-trip transactions mentioned earlier. Rationalization is a justification of fraud and the bad atmosphere of organizational culture. Second, if we see the conclusion by each position, CEO, CFO, and COO are ignored numerous red flags and given perceived opportunities. PwC was charged with a variety of failures in conducting its audit of Krispy Kreme. Lastly, SEC discovered Krispy Kreme's financial fraud and tried to make it right. Now, I will talk about the recommendation. We divided the recommendation into 2 sections. First, since the executives were unethical and ignored the financial fraud, we recognized it with regards to the corporate management problems. So, in corporate management, they need to get ethical leadership and implement internal control well. That's why they need to have and improve the elements of ethical leadership, which are integrity, honesty, fairness, justice, responsibility, accountability, and empathy. Also, they need to help in setting goals and achieve employees and perform all decision making. In addition, they need to moral intensity and create a good organizational culture or environment which can be made up of opportunities for whistleblowing. In this case, PwC review their own work and they provide their own suggestion. And it affects their independence. So that's the problem. Policies should really be improved regarding engagement that might affect the independent auditor. They should be penalized because policy or standard should be they cannot do the same audit of their work because they already provide audit consultancy service. They should improve their policies of PwC. They should not have engagement that would affect their independence. In other words, they need to get good policies. They may prevent them about policies that affect their independence engagement. Moreover, they need to train continuously to develop the ability to deal with all kinds of moral problems they may arise within the organization and to infer ethical conflicts through systematic methods, judgments, and reflections. Then, they would be able to eliminate cognitive discord by allowing actions to coincide with values and belief. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you for watching.